Hello and welcome to this short little video on genre. Genre is a big fancy word, comes from French actually, and if you want to go back in time, it even means something more. So let's take a look at the root of the word. Meaning it comes from the same Latin origin as the word genus, I believe that's how you pronounce it, meaning it belongs to the same group or family. And we're talking about genre in the form of literature and storytelling, both in print and in movies, but primarily in print, and where there are different types of families or groups that are categorized when it comes to different types of genres, as we are referring to them in the literary world. Let's look at a few of them. So let's look at romance. An example of a classic romance genre book would be Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is fairly well known even for those who haven't read it. It's so influential it actually spawned several movies, including one, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. So this is an example of where its primary focus is dealing with the matters of the heart and understanding and the complexity of why we fall in love and how and the reasons and such like that. Romance. Yes, okay, let's look at the next one. Literary fiction. This is kind of a catch-all for things that don't quite fit into another thing. That's stuff that's made up, but it's really maybe period pieces or really kind of dealing with particular subjects. And a great example of literary fiction would be The Great Gatsby from F. Scott Fitzgerald. Once again, a very influential book that takes place in the 1920s. It is, I believe it's the 1920s, forgive me if I am misremembering. Again, spawned several movies, and it is known in general culture just as really a look at understanding how humans respond and what lengths they will go to based on any number of motivations. Okay, let's look at the next one. Mystery. Well, we can't talk about mystery without talking about one of the queens of mystery, Agatha Christie, who is famous for many things. One of the more popular books is Murder on the Orient Express, and it even is so influential that it's inspired a movie that came out within the last few years with an all-star cast. So that shows an example of basically a whodunit. Generally there is murder involved or something has gone afoul and you have to figure out what it is. Mystery. Then we cannot talk about genres without ignoring the Western thing. Again, this is basically more of the American West. In time like that, and one of the kings of that would be Larry McMurtry, known for many, many works, but including the Lonesome Dove Chronicles. Again, this kind of experiences what explains and explores the concept of a simpler time as far as technology, yet a time when man is somewhat intellectual, yet they have to deal with the challenges of everyday life and how that is perceived. So that is one of the draws of Westerns. Moving on to science fiction. Now, often people misinterpret what science fiction is. We're going to touch on that a little bit more. An example of a classic science fiction book would be 1984, George Orwell. Like it or love it, again, me personally, not a huge fan of it, but I respect it. I don't particularly like the content inside of it, the tone. That's not a criticism towards George Orwell. It is what it is. It's not exactly a book you walk away feeling good about life, but it does. Science fiction is significant because it generally takes a look at where we are now and extrapolates kind of what would happen in the future based on changes in technology, changes over time, and such like that. And pure science fiction deals solely within the realm of what is possible or what is perceived to be possible with technology and how that interacts with our humanity. Not to be confused with fantasy. Fantasy and science fiction are two different genres. And a lot of people get them confused, especially if you go to a bookstore and they have fantasy, science fiction in the same place. That is two different genres, so don't get confused. An example of classic fantasy books would be, of course, The Lord of the Rings. What makes this so influential is simply because not only did it spawn, many books and inspired many authors to write, but it really set up a lot of archetypes as far as what a wizard looks like. Goblins, halflings, heroes, and all sorts of just elements that have become staples in the fantasy world. Magic, a lot of I can kind of really focus on soft magic, where there's not a lot of rules explained, yet things happen in a logical way, and a lot of story building and world building in the fantasy thing. Not to be confused with science fiction. Now, you can mix genres. You can take two genres and mix them together. An example of this would be, well, Star Wars. A lot of people think Star Wars is a science fiction movie. It is not. It is a science fiction and fantasy movie. It has fantastical elements with, I don't know, let's say the Force. Okay? Because that is something that is of a fantasy nature. It's basically magic. Okay? You call it what you will, but it is magic. It just basically is. Now they try to explain it in some of the prequels with midi-chlorians or whatever what it is. But basically, when you look at Star Wars, it does look at, you have your spaceships and your laser guns and stuff like that. But at the heart of it is really a fantasy story. So you've mixed two genres together. Another example of a mixed genre is something fairly contemporary. There was a TV show that lasted a whole 13 episodes, not of which all of them aired, and it inspired a movie, and the movie called Firefly, and the movie it inspired was called Serenity. This is the less popular genre of the science fiction western. Okay, so actually it is basically a western set in outer space. But it is definitely a mixed genre. That is something to absolutely consider. And from a personal note, because this is not a shameless plug, but it's just so I'm showing some credibility in what I know I'm talking about, I actually wrote a book that is considered to be a mixed genre, and it is called The Mirror of the Soul. And the quick story behind this is that one of my favorite musicians, Chris de Burgh, who's probably the most well-known for his song Lady in Red, it was a big hit in the 80s in America and actually all over the world. But he continued to put out music, and he had a song, I believe it was in 2004, 2006, it came out, and it was called The Mirror of the Soul. And when I heard the song, it's an epic song, it's like 9 minutes long, and it told this amazing story. And I thought, wow, that would make an excellent story. So I actually then reached out to Chris de Burgh's management and approached them about the idea of writing a book based on the song, and then to throw in other elements from other Chris de Burgh songs. I was able to actually have interaction with Chris himself, and he gave me some insight as I sent him my outline and my premise and my pitch, as it were, and I got legal permission to do so. So just, that's a note here, this is all legal, it's all in the open up, and if you look at the book, that shows that it gives the legal permission that I have to write this. But basically the genre is historical fiction / fantasy. So it takes place right after the 100 Years' War in France by the Abbé Saint-Pierre, and basically what happens is a giant diamond falls from the sky and lands, and basically is found by a farmer who's not sure what to do with it. When he touches it, it shines, and it glows, and it makes him feel just absolutely amazing as far as just peaceful and calm. And unsure what to do with this marvelous gift, which must have come from God, he takes it to the monks at the Abbé Saint-Pierre, who instead, again, during the 100 Years' War, really not the best of individuals. And they see it, especially the abbot, he sees it as a way to gain power and to seize over the superstitions and beliefs of the people, to get them to donate to him, because the donations are now starting to run low as the war is coming to an end. So he's hungry for power. There's only one catch. The monks at the Abbé Saint-Pierre and the abbot cannot make the diamond shine. So they use subterfuge and they use tricks of the light to make it appear as so. Okay. So basically it is a history. It takes place in a real place at a real time, but it adds this element of fantasy where you have a diamond that glows, that is absolutely fantastical in nature. I don't want to spoil the big ending of what happens and stuff like that. But you have a historical fiction where you add a fantasy element, and all of it is just really a commentary or an insight on what drives us as humans to do what we do and what we believe. So anyway, just a quick little insight on the different types of genres and that are out there now. Of course, there's a lot more that are in this video. There's also the horror genre and dystopian genre and such. But these are the highlights of genre.